Hello, in this session we're going to install and discover the Debug Toolbar extension. This is a fantastic tool that gives a huge amount of information about the running page, with insights into page requests, views being rendered, SQL traces and metrics, and logging. You'll very quickly find it indispensable in your development process. We've installed a few extensions already, and the procedure for this extension is much the same. We download the zip file from the extensions website, and then we open the zip file and copy the directory into the protected extensions folder. And then to configure the extension, we add a new log route to config main.php. And then you need to check the IP addresses match your own IP address. Another extension worth mentioning, if you're a Google Chrome user, is the PHP console extension. And again, we can download the zip file for this, open it and copy to our extensions directory. And again, this needs another log route in our config file, so we can add this to our config file as well. To get this extension to work, you'll also need to install the PHP console Chrome extension. Now let's go and see how they work, starting with the debug toolbar. If we refresh our home page, and we'll see the debug toolbar on the right. You can hide the toolbar by clicking this little blue bug and then back on. Now the server tab gives a PHP info style output and much more. And then the request tab gives page request information, and I find this particularly useful for checking post requests. Here's a fairly complex page from an application that I developed a while ago, and if I save that page, notice the flash message here, but then we can go in and check the post information, and we'll see that there are two arrays of post information down here. Back to the debug toolbar, settings tab shows a lot of useful information, some of which comes from the config file. But for me, the most useful here is the client script output. When you start using Ajax widgets, like the grid view, you'll find that embeds snippets of JavaScript. And rather than scrolling through source code in the browser, and it can be quite difficult to find at times, you can very quickly check what JavaScript is included here. And obviously, if you want to debug the JavaScript, you'll still need to use the browser debugger. Views rendering tab shows an entry for each view that has been rendered, including the layouts and the main layout view. And you can drill down to see what variables have been passed through to each view. The SQL tab is much like the log outputs that we saw in our last session, but in a much more readable format. This tab displays each piece of SQL that was executed for that page and gives real insight into SQL bottlenecks and also unnecessary lazy loadings. The logging tab, like the SQL tab, but it's a much tidier rendition of the C weblog route, and also it makes the lazy loadings very obvious. As the debug toolbar outputs all the logging information that in our last session we added to the C weblog route, we could remove the C weblog route, which will keep our page tidier, particularly when rendering subpages in pop-ups. So we'll remove that from the config file, refresh, and we don't have the C weblog route, but we still have all the information in our toolbar. So now to the PHP console extension. Using this extension, we can dump variables into the Chrome console without messing up our page output with var dumps. A while ago, we used the site index view to dump some user information. So let's update that to output to the PHP console instead. We'll use a debug function provided by the console extension. And then we'll reference a variable that doesn't exist, and lastly throw an exception. And then we'll run that, and we can see the warning messages with pop-ups too, and the output of the variables. So now that we're all tooled up to debug our applications, in our next session we'll be adding error handling to our application and see how handles error pages.